Federal Executive Council approves more than 38.2 billion naira for road projects. Nigerians spend $13 billion annually on e-commerce. Public debt hits 35 trillion naira, says the Debt Management Office. Oil slips but holds to most gains after draw in U.S. stocks. Asia shares slip as most casino stocks in Hong Kong continue to slide. Details of these and more on Business Express on the network service of the NTA. And we're reaching you live from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I'm Lekatun Babatunde. The Federal Executive Council has approved more than 38.2 billion naira for the completion of strategic roads infrastructure projects in parts of the country for enhanced socio-economic development. Works and Housing Minister Babatunde Fashola announced this while briefing journalists after the meeting of the council.
The second one is the 20-kilometer dualization of Yenegua Road Junction to Kulu, to Utuke, and to Bayelsa Palm in Bayelsa State. That contract was awarded in December 2014 on the eve of the tenure of the last administration. It is one of the contracts that we have since reactivated with the Sukuk, but there are some additional works that need to be done that support a revision of the contract by 7.947 billion.
In another development, the federal government has inaugurated a committee for the implementation of partial commercialization of the 4 pilot river basin development authorities (RBDAs).
The terms of reference for the PIC are as follows. A. Review the approved recommendations on the proposed implementation strategy by the advisors for the partial commercialization and introduction of PPP in some projects of the pilot RBDAs.
We believe will lead to the optimization of the RBDA's assets and the key resource of water along the value chain of agriculture, irrigation, small-scale power generation, and potable water for consumption.
The Debt Management Office says the nation's public debt stock stood at 34.46 trillion naira at the end of June. The Director General of the Debt Management Office, Patience Onia, who said this, noted that total public debt is comprised of the domestic and external debts of the federal government, the 36 state governments, and the Federal Capital Territory. Nigeria's total public debt stock was 33.107 trillion naira as at March 31, 2021. Now, this indicates a 2.358 trillion naira rise in the debt stock from the end of the first quarter of the year to the end of the second quarter. The breakdown of the public debt figure on the review indicated that the external debt was 13.711 trillion naira, representing 38.66%. On the other hand, domestic debt was 21.754 trillion naira, representing 61.34% of the total stock. And the dollar drifted near the middle of its range of the past month versus major peers on Thursday. The Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation rate, fell to 17.01% in August. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, this will be the 5th consecutive month that the country's inflation rate will be trending downward. Alika Opanachi Arwa tells us more.
According to the latest Consumer Price Index, the rate is 0.3 percentage points lower than the 17.38% recorded in July this year. This is the 5th month that the country's inflation rate will be trending downward since March this year. Inflation dropped from 18.17% in March to 18.12% in April, before dropping further to 17.93%, 17.75%, and 17.38% in the months of May, June, and July. Month-on-month basis, the headline index increased by 1.02% in August 2021, adding that this is 0.09% rate higher than the 0.93% recorded in July 2021.
Okay, now to take a look at the factors at play here in the data released by the National Bureau of Statistics and projections for the monetary policy meeting starting today in Abuja is an economist, Paul Alaje of SPM Professionals. Mr. Paul, always nice to have you on set. You're welcome.
Thank you so very much for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. 0.37%. How significant is this number looking at the CPI just released?
Well, it's so very significant. Recall that we're at 18%, and if inflation is increasing at 18%, it's more worrisome than when it's increasing now at 17.01%. It looks like we have made some level of gains from where we were, increasing at 18% to increasing at 17.5%. What it means is that for every 100 naira we had at about February last year, the following year we have lost about 18 naira from 1 naira. But what we have now is that we have even improved from where we were to about losing only 17 naira of every 100 naira. I believe if we can intensify effort, we're going to be getting back to where we started this inflation journey for, which is between 10 to 11%.
Okay, so what are the factors at play here responsible for the steady decline 5 straight months from March?
Okay, so when you look at one of them is, of course, Nigeria has refused to lock down. Last year we locked down. We have very high inflation even in air tickets. Plane, one of the ways people moved around because of interstate ban was to move by air, and you saw what ticket the economy was as high as 80 to 90,000. Today you can see 20 something, 30 something, 40 something thousand for economy ticket, and that is for the rich. For the poor, not so many organizations were producing. Food were relatively high because of restriction, food moving from one state to another. But you even saw evidence in food inflation from 21% to about 20%. Yeah, it's still high, but it's an improvement from where we were coming from. So when you see government, apart from that, those were initiatives by governments to say, instead of locking down, even though COVID-19 is still very real, why not allow people to use non-pharmaceutical approach to work while we don't lock down the economy? But government has also had a lot of intervention programs, which I want to encourage CBN to not stop those programs, because apart from inflation, people would have been living hand to mouth by now, but you saw direct transfer to people who are really in their need of those monies that government truly supported. So for me, I think we need to provide more of this support for businesses and also to support households who have been badly affected. So we have all of these factors affect inflation, but because of one or two policies that have been made, we have started seeing gradual reduction in the impact of inflation in our economy.
The average man out there, how do they relate with these things? Because most people will say the cost of food is still high, as you have pointed out. The forex market is just going haywire. How do we get the man on the street to relate with all this?
Okay, so we need to now explain to the man on the street. When we say inflation is falling, that is not literal. We are saying that inflation is increasing at a reducing rate. So inflation is still increasing by 17%, but it is lower than where we were this time last year. So when National Bureau of Statistics release figure, it is important we interpret it correctly. We are not saying we are in the best position yet, but we are saying that we are now on a right direction. People have told me that, oh, should we truly believe that number? And I will tell you, we need to believe the number. And let me quickly tell you why the number is very correct. I've mentioned earlier why you might be having reduced inflation. Again, the number is correct because National Bureau of Statistics is not saying there is no inflation. It agreed that there is high inflation. In fact, when you look at month-on-month inflation, it's even high compared to last month. So when you go to the market, average commodity is a bit higher. Why? Because You saw what is happening in exchange rate, particularly parallel market, where some people are speculating on naira. So for me, I think the numbers are correct. Inflation is increasing at a reducing rate, which we need to intensify effort so that we can bring it even lower than what we have today. I don't doubt the figure released by National Bureau of Statistics, particularly this fifth consecutive, what people call reduction. But in the real sense, it is increasing at a reducing rate. Before now, it was increasing at an increasing rate, and that is what is very dangerous. Now we know that we are going towards a direction of fall, though the numbers are increasing. What central bank has targeted is between 6 to 9% inflation rate. We were very close to that before COVID. We were close to 11%. We're all watching to see how we can get to around 10 or eventually 9%, but we were unable before COVID struck, and we started going back to 12 to 13 to 14 to 15. And of course, insecurity has not really helped. It has also made food inflation to be the major driver. At a time, we made policy to say imports should not come to Nigeria, but I'm happy that government quickly reversed that, even though it took a year and inflation already devastated some of the other prices, because you don't have enough access to food and so many other things, because we did not put some things in place before the policy was made. But what I want Nigerians to know is that National Bureau of Statistics is saying, as at August, though inflation increased, but it is at a reducing rate. If we intensify effort by government providing more enabling environment for private sector, if we don't increase fuel prices, which is very important, and we don't increase cost of power, which is also very important, because if you adjust any of those two, you will see inflation go back up. It will not be increasing at an increasing rate. But if you leave those two to watch what the figures will be, it will also help Monetary Policy Committee to see how they can make policy that will not only force inflation to go further down, but make economy to grow, and also see what they can do around exchange rates, which is of course becoming very embarrassing in recent time.
Okay, so now that you've gone to the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, perhaps I just keep and go there straight away. How will these figures be affecting the decisions of the MPC? They are already meeting. How will this also be affecting the GDP for this quarter?
Okay, so when you look at the GDP figures, we have seen 5.01% or 5.1%, over 5%, which is good news compared to where we were last year, where we have minus 6%. So that's this time last year. So we have 5.1%, even though we are comparing ourselves with a negative base year. So it is expected. What I think Monetary Policy Authority should do, or committee should do, is to hold rates across board, because it would be too dangerous to plan based on that 5% and say, now that the economy has increased, let us increase rate. What it means is that there will be tremendous negative impact on quite a number of things. You are going to see inflation after 2 or 3 months will go down, but growth will not be real. So we have seen one GDP growth rate, and people are asking, oh, but my economy, personal economy is not growing yet. So I think what we should do is to keep watching for another 2 months. Let's see if this downward trend in inflation will continue. If we continue to see inflation go down to around 15% as projected by the end of the year, and we are now seeing a more stable growth, if we can report another growth, recall that we have minus 6.1%, we have another minus in the third quarter of 2020. If we can have that to the fourth quarter, if Monetary Policy Committee comes and wants to jack up back monetary policy rates to between 13 to 14%, then that would make a lot of sense. But now, if you adjust any rate, it's going to send negative signal. More so that the growth we have has not impacted on jobs yet. It has also not impacted significantly on inflation yet. So what is to do is to sit it on the fence. It doesn't mean central bank or Monetary Policy Committee are not doing anything. What I think they should work on in this committee is how to combat those that are speculating on FX, particularly at the parallel market, whether they are going to have something to do with Bureau de change, or they are still going to maintain a no direct relationship. They will go to commercial bank, and perhaps to also make that announcement as they did in 2017 on how Nigeria can go and mass to their bank if they have legitimate businesses to do abroad. I believe Central Bank under Emefiele, or under Governor Emefiele, has done this before, and I strongly believe that he can do it again. I'm just convinced convinced that Emefiele can do this again. We seem to be running out of time, by the way, but I strongly believe that if he can put his committee together, either through Monetary Policy Committee or directly through the central bank, and look at how, the challenge we have now is that a lot of Nigeria are not sure whether currency will further devalue, whether central bank will devalue. So we need that communication of confidence to say that we are not going to devalue Naira, because when you look at the market, even though you might see some level of fluctuation, but it's not up to 5-10%. That's at official rate. But the way a lot of people are trying to keep dollar, to hold it in their hands, I just think it does not mean well for Nigeria, because most of the things we consume are coming from abroad. If people cannot access it because they feel for non-valid, it's going to have negative impact on pricing at the end of the day. So all the gains we seem to be having in increasing at a reducing rate for inflation may be reversed. That is why Central Bank and Monetary Policy Committee must throw their heart into the game.
Okay, now still this dollarization issue, there's been complaints that we still have people who beat the system.
Definitely.
So for those beating the system, are we saying that there can't be a punitive sort of measure that the world can see that yes, we're taking action against these people?
Well, until we start having those actions, I don't think we're going to see the end to this. So it's either you want to bring back the BDC directly to CBN and start fresh registration because they've been disbanded by Central Bank according to the statement released by the governor. Maybe we will bring them in and give new rules for them to for the partnership or relationship to work, but when you look at the argument of Central Bank, when the number doubled in less than 1 year, and we see that all the allocation were not having direct impact, so we need beyond policy now. We need even politics to get involved in this to ensure that if Central Bank is bringing back Bureau de change, we can be sure that the parallel market, because there is no way you have this kind of thing going on in the parallel market and you want to excuse operators of Bureau de change. It might keep going up. I see over 550 already, but if you ask me, if Central Bank wants to get involved directly, they could even select some organized operators of Bureau de change and work with them to ensure that we not only crash the official market but parallel market. Exactly what we did in 2017, 2018, we can repeat it. And I'm also waiting for Central Bank to play that final card so that we can have improved exchange rates in Nigeria.
Okay, now, so before I let you go, 15 trillion naira is what that purpose vehicle for infrastructure was what the governor announced just barely 48 hours. 48 hours ago. He announced it at the CIBN conference. Will be put forward infraco by the CBN, taking place middle of October, basically. How will this be affecting the jobs market, for instance, and of course service delivery? If you can just briefly give us that before.
Well, it's huge good news. Recall that even the entire budget of Nigeria is far lower than 14 trillion naira. If you have 15 trillion naira going into infrastructure, it's going to be sustainable. My interest is what sovereign wealth have started doing. We ensure that we have private sector individual, not left in the hand of public sector, private individual to manage this and to ensure that there is returns. We run it as business, but we not only see the infrastructure in place, we are also going to see interest, profitability in all of this. Then that makes it become sustainable. Nigeria is not the first country to do this, even though we are the first to set up this kind of structure, but to allow private sector to build infrastructure, we are not the first. And until we do this and do it well, and in fact, in near future, we may have to even add another 15 or another 15 and look at 45 trillion for us to start closing the gap that we have in our infrastructure. What that will mean is that further borrowing will no longer be necessitated, because if we don't do this and put 15 or even 30, if you ask for my opinion, I will be saying we need to even do more, but it's a good start that we have, because we need to quickly do something about continuous borrowing coming from within or outside Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul Alaji, for always making our time to be part of the program.
Thank you so very much for having me.
Thank you. So we move straight to Surviving COVID-19 series.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Amid the effects of COVID-19 on the economy, tenants owed rent as surviving the pandemic was the focus of most people. But As the economy recovers, Uduak Idem yearns for the good old days civil servants owned houses by paying through salary deductions.
Then we used to have estates provided for the working class, deducted from their salaries. And even the private sector also keyed into such social housing programs.
A father comes back and is likely exposed and he doesn't have a room which is ensuite he can stay. How can he effectively isolate without endangering and exposing other family members in the same building?
In balancing health and wealth, the federal government, under the National Housing Program of the Economic Sustainability Committee, has placed the cost of each housing unit around 2 million naira over a payment period of 15 years and funded under the 200 billion naira debenture deed by the Apex Bank. But before this becomes reality, Fazazi Nasiru, an estate developer, says property business is at its low as most people are still struggling to pay rent, just as the prices of building materials are on the increase.
During the pandemic, it was indeed a hard time. But you know, we were in the business before the pandemic, so we had savings, we had projects that were ongoing, so we just tried to manage.
Both Uduak, Throot and Fasazi agree that the provision of shelter is the second most important need of man after food, hence the need for concerted efforts by all.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank.
Ahead of the implementation of the Petroleum Industry Act, the Department of Petroleum Resources (DPR) is intensifying collaboration with the Petroleum Technology Development Fund (PTDF) to deepen institutional capacities and technological enablers for the growth of the nation's oil and gas sector. This was the crux of a one-day stakeholders meeting between both agencies in Abuja.
Industry requires capacity and skill for value to be created. Without capacity and skill, the industry will never go anywhere.
Where we're heading to now, our plans are, look, where is the industry heading? What will be the requirements of the industry 5-10 years ahead? And you can only do that if you have access to the plans of the operators of the industry.
Nigerian stocks closed yesterday positive and are resuming on such positive notes, and away from home, Asia Pacific stocks largely opened lower in Thursday's session.
The global scene, shares in major Asia-Pacific markets mostly slipped in Thursday's trade, with casino shares in Hong Kong mostly seeing another day of sharp losses. The broader Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong shed 1.99%. In mainland China, the Shanghai Composite fell 1.31%, and the Nikkei in Japan also slipped 0.62%. Markets in Europe received a weak handover from Asia-Pacific, where Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index led the declines among major indices. U.S. stock futures were little changed in early morning trading on Thursday, following a rebound on Wall Street as the market tried to avert the seasonally weak September. Futures on the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose just 3 points. S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq 100 futures traded in mildly negative territory. In Africa, some stocks are shaking off losses induced by global trends on Wednesday. Namibia's overall index opened marginally positive. South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 still in red, while others are yet to post new figures. Bosude Ebo, Business Express.
And with that, we end this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. Business Express returns Friday at 3 p.m. I'm Leah Katun. Baba Tunde saying be safe out there, and God bless Nigeria.